Mental health series. If you didn't get to see the first week, we kind of did an intro week just talking about mental health and how do you balance mental health with sin, or where do the lines get drawn, or how do we know where to draw the lines, and how do we balance the Bible with what psychology tells us, and we tried to figure it out the best we could. If you missed that, go back and watch the video so that we can try to stay balanced in all of this. This Sunday, Loretta, will you come join us, please? Come on. Loretta, did you graduate last year? The year before? It's been 2 years already. That's right, because you were here for graduation, and we had graduation here 2 years ago. Thank you for being here. Would you express appreciation to Miss Loretta White? How long have you been at the church?
20 years? Yeah.
Okay. So before you had kids? No, a little bit after.
Before.
Just before. What's
Yeah.
Nico's?
Yeah. I remember being in a small group and all excited to announce that I was pregnant. And Kim Blum stood up first and said she was pregnant.
That's funny.
So I was all deflated. She stole my thunder.
Yeah.
And
that was, and then there was today, and then there was 20 years in the middle.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
So you went to Phoenix Seminary,
Yes.
did your master's degree there in
Yes.
counseling,
Mm-hmm.
and then took the test, got licensed. Well done.
Yes.
And then where are you at now, working as a counselor?
I'm at Ezra Counseling Services, and my supervisor and one of the counselors are here too today, Mandy. Hi, Mandy. Hi, Jacqueline.
Good, supportive boss. Well done.
Yes.
Nice job. Okay, so if you haven't been with us, what I've been asking the counselors to do is just, you pick the topic essentially, or I've talked with them about what do you normally see in a counseling office? What do you see regularly? What do you experience regularly? And so we've kind of crafted the topics around what they experience on a regular basis so that all these ladies that are not used to being up here answering me, grilling them questions and public speaking are super comfortable with what they're talking about because they do it all the time. So one of the things that you said when we were talking was that you see kind of a various lots of different things, but what it seems like you keep coming back to with almost everybody that comes into your office, no matter if they're single or married or whatever, is this self-regulation piece. It seems to be causing lots of problems for people.
Yes.
Okay, so what happens, just tell us, because when I say self-regulate, some people know what that means and other people are like, does that just mean take deep breaths? Like, what do I do? What's going on? So tell everybody quickly, biologically, physically, mentally, what's happening when we don't self-regulate? What can they look for so that they know, I'm just off a cliff. I'm not self-regulating right now.
Yeah.
What's happening?
Wow. So people are going to experience it differently.
Okay.
If I could just share what I experienced.
Sure.
When I was in the seat, I wasn't dysregulated, but I was deep breathing. And that does help some people. But some people, when they're dysregulated, they have a lot of energy that comes with it.
Okay.
And so they might turn to a fight or flight response. And we hear about that. Other people might go into hypoarousal. That's hyperarousal. Other people might go into hypoarousal. They may feel numb, disconnected. Yeah. But what we're going for is regulation. So if we think of a window, there's an upper part of the window and a lower part of the window.
Mm-hmm.
When we go through the upper part, we're in hypoarousal. And when we go through the bottom, we're also in hypoarousal. Not also, we're in hypoarousal. We want to be in the middle.
Okay.
I want to differentiate between regular feelings and dysregulation.
Okay.
With regular feelings, they can ebb and flow,
Sure.
right? They can increase gradually, and it's more about the present. With dysregulation, it's intense. It can surge quickly, and it takes a while to fade.
What happens in the brain? What happens mentally when someone is dysregulated?
Yeah, so Mendel touched on this a couple weeks ago when we're dysregulated, our brain, the part of our brain that's thinking, that's rational, then can make a plan, shuts down. And so while it shuts down, it actually, we call it like flip our lid, and so we don't have access to that brain because our body is telling us that we need to react, we're in danger, and we need to do something. And so the thinking brain doesn't talk to the emotional brain. And so I work with clients on how to recognize that that's happening, because a lot of times we don't know. Sometimes we're so used to living outside of our window that we don't know that's happening. But we can experience it in our body. And so I work with clients on slowing it down and recognizing what's happening so that they can actually start to communicate with their own brain and body that, oh, I'm not in a dangerous situation, that what I'm experiencing might be related to trauma. And it's like the trauma from the past comes into the present.
All of a sudden.
Yeah.
So give them so you said you have trouble connecting emotionally. That happens.
Yep.
That happens mentally. What else mentally? Because I know a lot of people experience some mental things that they're not quite sure exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
So I mean things like brain fog.
Yeah.
What else happens when people can't? Okay, critical thinking part of their brain is shut off.
Yep.
And now what's happening mentally for them?
Well, I've got a little image here. I've got my little notes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because I'm not a speaker.
You're doing great.
In case I forgot everything when I came up here.
Does that happen when you get dysregulated?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But I'm just going to share some of the symptoms that I experienced because of trauma that I didn't actually realize were because of trauma, but I've learned over the years. I have very few memories of childhood. I didn't know that was because of trauma. Hypervigilance. I was scanning the room all the time. I didn't trust people. Emotionally overwhelmed all the time. Eating disorder. I've struggled with that many years. Yeah, very difficult to concentrate, especially when you're in a master's program. So I probably had to study more than others. Being irritable. Yeah.
Why does our brain shut off? I mean, why did God make us that way? I mean, he made us this way, but why? Why?
Yeah, because our brains believes that we're in a traumatic experience, that we're in danger, and so it shuts off so we can use that instinctive part of us that gives us that surge of energy to do something to protect ourselves.
Which is great if you're in a dangerous situation.
Yes.
Not great if you're just talking with your wife.
Right, which often happens in couples because often one triggers the other, then triggers the other, and they end up in this pattern and they don't understand each other, and it gets really frustrating.
Sure. Okay, so if you touched on this just for a second. If we don't do this regularly, so say someone doesn't notice the biological signs, they don't notice the physical signs, the mental signs, and they just constantly live in this state of hyperarousal or hypoarousal, if that's their default. What happens then? If this just continues and we don't work on this, we don't try to self-regulate, we don't try to stop the craziness, what happens then if we live in this for an extended period of time?
Well, if we're living above through the top of our window, we can only stay there for so long.
Okay.
So eventually we're going to collapse, and then we're going to go into hypoarousal. But some of the signs of chronic hyperarousal: emotional overwhelm, panic, impulsivity, hypervigilance, defensiveness, feeling unsafe, reactivity, anger, racing thoughts.
Anybody know anybody that does those things? Anybody know a lot of people that do those things? Tech person wants you to keep your mic up so he doesn't have to do this back there.
You're doing a great job.
Okay, so what scenarios? You said when we talked, I've seen this come up in lots of different scenarios, and people fail to dysregulate, and then things blow up in their face. And it's not necessarily that it's all their fault, but what scenarios do you see this happen most often, where people get dysregulated and causes problems in their life? What sort of scenarios?
Oh my goodness. Because we don't know when it's going to happen, it can impact us anytime, anywhere. It impacts us at work. It impacts us at home, with our spouses, with our children. If I'll just share a little bit about me, I didn't recognize that I had dysregulation, and I was dealing with it all the time. But I saw something in my children. And so, of course, I wanted to help them. They needed help. But as I started learning more about it, I realized that I needed help. I needed to learn how to regulate myself. And I think of that scenario on the airplane when they tell you to put your oxygen on first before you put it on your children. I couldn't help them regulate if I was dysregulated.
Sure.
And one of the things that one of my professors said that sticks out to me is that dysregulation leads to dysregulation, leads to dysregulation. So if I'm dysregulated, there's a good chance my child is going to become dysregulated,
Sure.
that Todd's going to become dysregulated, and then we're all doing it together. And that's not fun.
Yeah. So this could explain why some people's marriages spin. This could explain why some people's relationship with their kids spins and
Yes.
spins and spins.
Yes.
Why some people go to work and they can never get along with any bosses. They never
Yes.
get along with coworkers. They spin and spin and spin and spin, and they
Yeah.
jump from job to job to job, and nothing's ever satisfying.
Yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah. And one thing that I just want to point out that is so special is that when we are regulated, that's when we're closer to God. That's when we're closer to people. That's when we can connect.
So you're saying that if we're outside of our window of tolerance, and we're let's say hyper aroused, or we're numb. If we're numb, we can't connect with God. If we think we're constantly in danger, or everything's a threat around us, and God's going to end up being a threat to us as well, is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah.
And so how do we connect with God when he's a threat? And how do we connect with God when we're so numb that we don't connect with anybody?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you help us work through this? How do you help people get regulated, stay regulated? How do you help people start with that?
Yeah. So part of that is helping clients slow down what's happening, because it feels like it just goes from 0 to 100.
Sure.
And it's very intense. But if we help them slow down, and that might be taking breaths, it might be recognizing that, when I start to get dysregulated, my heart races, or I feel nauseous, to notice that that's happening, and use tools that help them. That could be deep breathing. It could be pushing against a wall. And if you haven't tried that, when you feel a lot of energy and you just push with your muscles, almost like a calf stretch, it really helps use up that energy to help your body calm down.
So what if breathing doesn't work?
Yeah.
What if I'm like, why can I take a few deep breaths and move on with the conversation, and why does sometimes that just doesn't work at all?
Yeah. So breathing it sounds really simple, right? We have to do it to live, right? But sometimes we're shallow breathing. That's part of the dysregulation. But we want to do deep diaphragmatic breathing, where we're inhaling in through using our diaphragm to push down, inhaling through our ribs, exhaling through our mouth. And some people can't do that.
Sure.
Because it doesn't help, or don't want to do that because they feel more tense. And so they might want to walk take a walk. I tell people, create that space that you need. Maybe if you're at work, you go to the bathroom, even when you don't have to. Maybe you just walk down the hallway. You do something to slow down the process.
And if people are willing to do this regularly and manage it, they see the signs physically, they notice what's happening in their brain, and they're able to slow the process. Does this get easier?
Oh, yes. But it takes time, right? We really have to learn how to pay attention to what's happening, because we're actually coordinating 3 parts of our brain to recognize that we're in the present, we're safe, we don't have to mobilize, that what we're experiencing is a trigger. We're not in a dangerous situation.
And then once we get into that pattern can continue.
Yes, and we still might be triggered.
Sure.
We might do work and make progress and then feel like, what happened? I'm triggered again.
Yep.
But that's part of life and processes, that we may be re-triggered at a different point in life. It doesn't mean that what we've done didn't help.
Sure.
But it just means that something is happening and we need to get back to that process and work through it again.
So if they have questions on how they can do this or what they're experiencing, and maybe 1 or 2 things that you could give them, what would you say? If you feel like I get dysregulated often, what's 2 or 3 things that you would say? At least try starting with this.
Well, I would first say, look up window of tolerance. See what that means. See what it describes. Notice where you fall. Are you above the window? Are you below the window? I would start there.
Okay.
Just to see what that is like. And
Don't Google it right now. Google it right now.
It'll still be there later.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one. Then what?
Start paying attention. So I recommend mindfulness with my clients, to pay attention to what they're experiencing in their body without judgment. Because oftentimes we have a narrative and we're thinking about, what's wrong with me? I'm crazy. Drop that judgmental part and just pay attention to what's happening in your body.
Because we need the truth.
Yeah.
Can't fix it otherwise.
No.
Would you express appreciation to Loretta for sharing? Loretta, thanks for sharing your wisdom with us. Thanks for sharing your expertise. She's right. Lots of the things that we experience in our life, this can become a huge problem. Now, whether or not you becoming regulated and able to speak and able to think and able to have your body not keep falling apart on you, whether or not that fixes all your problems or not, it might not. But it may set you on the right direction or the right path to keep some of the negative stuff that you have going on, the relationships falling apart or the physical body falling apart. There's lots more to what Loretta shared. I'm sure my wife will share a little bit more next week as well. But if you noticed, both Alicia and Mindell both brought up this self-regulation piece. They both brought up how this impacts how we think, how this impacts how our body functions, how this impacts how we sleep. And we'll talk about it more next week as well. But for now, let's look at the scriptures for just a few minutes here. Here's what I want you to see. Go to 2 Timothy. This is a common verse. You may have memorized this verse, 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. I want you to see this, and we're talking about self-regulation, because here's the fascinating thing. Loretta's talking from a clinical perspective. You want to do this because mentally you'll have more clarity. You want to do this because physically you'll be in a better place. You want to do this because you'll have less stress in your life. You'll be able to manage relationships better. You want to do this on a practical level. I'm telling you, you want to do this because this is what the Spirit of God is pushing you to in your life. I'm going to read this verse to you, and if you know the fruit of the Spirit, we're talking about discipline or self-control. The reality is the Spirit of God is pushing you towards self-control at all points in your life. pushing you towards self-control with your marriage, pushing you towards self-control at work, pushing you towards self-control with your kids, pushing you towards self-control with your addictions. The Spirit of God that's living inside of you is literally saying, Anthony, at every turn, at every point, be self-controlled, which is exactly what Loretta is saying will do good for you if you can figure out how to manage. The irony is that what the Spirit of God is prompting you to do, Loretta is telling you biologically, psychologically, they found over observation, it works. Imagine that. The Spirit of God is going to push you towards self-regulation. Paul tells Timothy this, for God has not given you a spirit of timidity, a spirit of timidity, a spirit of fear. Some verses say what it really means is Paul's telling Timothy, God has not given you a lack of courage. God has not given you lack of courage to live morally. See, what you need to know about Timothy is that he lives in Ephesus, and Ephesus is a mess. One pastor said it like this, Ephesus is taking Timothy's lunch money. All right, they're beating him up. He's trying to do ministry, and they are all over him. And Paul's telling Timothy, young protege, listen, the Spirit of God inside of you has not given you a lack of courage to stand up to these crazy people. He has not given you a lack of moral courage to stand up and do the right thing. In other words, Timothy, the Spirit of God inside of you is not a coward to do the right thing. The right thing may be getting control of your emotions so you don't blow up at your wife. The right thing may be getting control of your emotions so you don't nitpick and nag your husband. The right thing may be getting control of your past and your trauma and your triggers so that you don't bleed that over into the next generation. But the Spirit of God, Paul tells Timothy, hasn't given you a cowardice sort of spirit, but he says, but a power that is the Holy Spirit. I don't know if you know, as a believer in Jesus Christ, you have supernatural power. There's a supernatural power inside of you, and you think to yourself, I can't regulate that way. I can't learn. I'm 85 years old, and I've been doing it this way for all my life, and I can't change it now. False. There's a Spirit of God inside of you that's given you power, and it's supernatural. So even when you're saying to yourself, I don't think I can do it. Okay, fine, great. The Spirit of God is inside of you, and that power is supernatural. So no more excuses. The love. I always kind of chuckle at this one, because don't you just need supernatural love to love some people sometimes? Timothy, those dummies in your church, you need supernatural love for them, but don't worry, you have it. Your family members, your coworkers, your kids, love them to death. I need something different right now to love this person because this is ridiculous. And Paul's telling Timothy, you have it. There's no excuses. You have a supernatural love inside of you. Now, when you were a sinner, Christ died for you, and so you can pass that on to the guy who's sinning also, and you think is crazy. And then the one we're talking about today, discipline, or some translations say self-control. It's a word that means to have an understanding that enables you to act sensibly. That's what self-discipline, that's why some translate it self-control and some translate it discipline. It's the ability, the knowledge to act sensibly. And you have that, not because it's you, because you have the Spirit of God inside of you. You have the Spirit of God inside of you, which is full of knowledge for you to act morally, courageously. You have it. So there's no excuses. You may be triggered, but you can focus. You may be heightened off a cliff, but you can regulate. You may be depressed and numb, but you can come back to life. You can feel. You can feel and it not be overwhelming to you forever. It may be overwhelming to you for a time, and you may need some help with that. Get it. But the Spirit of God inside of you is pushing you to know, I can be self-controlled. I have power that's outside of me. And I have love when I need it. You can remain calm. You can. You can remain calm even when you don't have all the information, because the Spirit of God inside of you knows all the information and can prompt you, be patient, be calm. Why? I don't get it. I don't understand. Because I know and I understand. But you got to trust God. The Spirit of God is always pushing you towards self-control. Always. Pushing you. Be self-controlled. Be self-controlled in your grieving. Be self-controlled in your addiction. Every person who's addicted knows the Spirit of God is pushing me to leave this behind. But lots of people who are addicted think, I got to get myself out of this. No, Paul tells Timothy, it's the Spirit of God inside of you that gives you power. You got to lean into Him. You want to get rid of that addiction. But He will prompt you to self-control. So, in other words, if you're thinking in your mind, I'm not really sure if I can hold my tongue, when my spouse and I start to spin and swirl, what does God want me to do? The Spirit of God inside of you is pushing you to break the cycle. Somebody's got to break the cycle. Otherwise, it's just going to spin and keep spinning. One pastor said it like this, and I think this is, I don't know, probably the most convicting and the most, who stops the argument? Who stops the argument between you and your kids? Who stops the argument between you and your spouse? Who stops the argument between you and your boss, you and your coworkers? Who stops the argument? The one who considers themselves the more mature person stops the argument. Work that out. Every time he says it, it's on the video, and every time he says it, I'm like, oh. You should consider yourself the more mature person than your children. So take the first step. I don't know if you should consider yourself the more mature person to your spouse. Okay, you work that out with them. But one of you, make the decision. And if you in your pride consider yourself to be the more mature one, then do the more mature thing. And be self-controlled. Lots of people know Galatians chapter 5. It's the second verse on your page. It's the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Some of you don't know that this word for self-control is different than the one from 2 Timothy. So the question is, how? 2 Timothy is in knowledge. It relates to the Holy Spirit. He's inside of you, and there's a knowledge, there's ability to do the right thing because He's prompting you to have some moral courage. This self-control and the fruit of the Spirit is complete control over one's desires and actions. Lots of people probably said, oh, well, being self-controlled or fruit of the Spirit means you're in control of your actions. But the word actually means to be in control of your desires and your actions. Which means everybody who thinks that they've been born a certain way and I desire certain things that are immoral and I've just been born that way, the Spirit of God, the fruit of the Spirit of God changes not only your actions but also your desires if He's in you. So there's hope to the person who thinks I just have to live with this forever. I just have to keep my desires from becoming reality. Not so, because the true fullness of the fruit of the Spirit is not just action power to do the right thing. It begins to change even your desires. To be self-controlled. To have some courage when it comes to living morally. To being a good parent. And a good spouse. And a good coworker. And a good friend. There's hope for the person who even feels like my desires are out of whack. It's okay. The Spirit of God is power. He's inside of you. Let me give this to you and then let me pray. Peter says this to his audience. The end of all things is near. Therefore, be of sound judgment. In other words, be self-controlled, sober for the purpose of prayer. The end of all things is near. And the encouragement that he gives, because the end of all things is near, is be self-controlled. Because the end of all things is near. Pray with me. God, thanks for Loretta. Thanks for her willingness to come sit on stage and demonstrate to us how to self-regulate. God, thanks for her willingness to look into her own life, observe things within her own kids, and humbly look in the mirror and say, what can I do to help my family? What can I do to help my kids? God, I pray you'd give each one of us in the room, men and women, young and old, that same spirit. And that if we see problems around us, we take a good look in the mirror. How can God change me? How can you transform me? God, with your gentleness and your kindness, we appreciate your willingness to help us. And in your conviction, God, thanks that you don't leave us where we are. Thanks that you don't leave us to flounder, to just have an endlessly bad marriage, to just have an endlessly bad relationship, to watch our kids grow up and not have a clue what to do. You give us tools, you help us, you train us if we open our eyes. Thanks for giving us the Spirit. Father, Jesus, thanks for sending us the Spirit. Thanks for giving us power. Thanks for not leaving us to figure all of life out on our own. Thanks for coming for us. We need it. We surrender to it. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.